How many of you in this place at some point in your life went to school? Most of you. Good. See, we live in a country that has a rich history of education. From our earliest days, we have as a country believed that education was essential for human flourishing. And so we are one of few countries in the world that from our earliest days has always valued teaching people. Now, there's a lot of debate over who we valued teaching and how we valued teaching them, and there's a lot to be said about how we failed to teach people. But as a country, we have always valued teaching others, building up those who are young into something new and something better. And our education in this system, or in this country, is a system focused mostly on one type of education: intellect. Let's teach you knowledge, things you need to know, things that will help you comprehend and understand and reason and make sense of the world around you. And if we can teach you enough intellect, you will be able to discover new things, to do great things, to become somebody great. Our education system is a big part of who we are as a country. In fact, education was so important that from our earliest days, we created what mostly started as seminaries and then later became universities, colleges, and systems of educating people not just beyond the basics, but far beyond that into something more, something deeper, and something better. In our university systems, many of those oldest and most elite schools were also known as they grew for being selective. Not everybody can equally learn because not everybody is equally gifted, or so the story has been told. And so we have a handful of universities in this country that are deemed to be the best of the best, and the price tag to go with it. There's one university, one college in particular. It's not a university, just a college, but it is perhaps the most exclusive and selective college this country has ever had. In its entire history, less than 2% of all people who applied ever got in. And of those 30 to 60 who got in every year, 2 to 5 would be given a job at the end of their college life. What college am I talking about? Obviously, if you know, the most prestigious one in the U.S., the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Clown College. I don't know if you knew this, but before it closed, the Clown College was statistically harder to get accepted into than Harvard or Yale. They really don't mess around when it comes to clowns, because it's no funny business. They took their job really seriously, and I considered applying to this college. And I very quickly discovered I did not have what it took to be a good clown. In fact, in the application, there's a whole system of showing off your body from multiple angles, both in your face paint and your costume and without, and showing off your special skills. And turns out I don't have any of the skills that are required to even be considered for the application for Clown College. And this Clown College was designed for people who recognized that they weren't clowning around. This was a real profession to be a part of the greatest show the world had ever seen. And this college inspired people to dream big. And when you got accepted, those 30 to 60 every year who entered in, you spent the entirety of your time in the program learning how to do nothing other than entertain and be a clown. And you would graduate Clown College, and when you graduated, you were given a unique identity that no other clown could copy. This was your image, this was your identity. There is no clown like you. And of those in this highly prestigious, highly selective Clown College, 2 to 5 at the most every year, the best of the best of the best would be given the most prestigious job to be a clown on tour with the Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey. What a beautiful thing to do. And most who finished clown school were given their clown identity, but did not get that role, and they had to settle for all the lesser clown roles out there. And that's no small thing. Now, you might be saying, what in the world are you talking about? Who cares about Clown College? In fact, it is now defunct. It has closed its doors. It doesn't exist any longer, which is a real disappointment. But who cares about Clown College? I believe this Clown College is a really helpful thing for you and me to discover Scripture better. And here's why. The Jewish custom of education that Jesus was accustomed to, that was around in the time of Jesus, looked very similar to Clown College. And I don't mean it was similar in that they were just making a bunch of clowns. I mean it was similar in that the system was not for everybody. In fact, here's how it worked in Jesus' day. If you were a child, usually between the ages of 4 and 5, you would be sent to school. And the school you would be sent to was called the Bet Sefer, that is the house of the book. And between the ages of 4 and 5 until about the age of 12, you would have one job in school: to learn and memorize the entirety of the Torah, or the first 5 books of the Bible. See, for them, all of knowledge was centered in what God has revealed to us. And so there is no knowledge outside of God. And so if you know Scripture, you can learn everything else. If you know the view through which we're to understand and interpret the world, everything else makes sense. So they would teach kids all of the Torah, the first 5 books. And the reason they would teach these first 5 books to kids is they are considered the law, God's rule for life, God's plan for people, God's will for how we should live. And for the Jewish people, it was essential that everyone in their community knew this law. And as an oral culture, they would hear it spoken, and they'd learn to recite it back, and they would memorize, so they had it committed to their heart, so that whatever they went about doing after they were 12, they would do it through the lens of God's commands and His plans. And after the age of 12, the majority of all kids would go back to the family business to become fishermen or blacksmith or any number of other careers. They'd go back to do the thing that their whole family had always done. Or they'd go back to doing the thing most of history has always done, learning how to grow just enough to survive, to feed yourself so you can live for another day. And this was life for almost all of the Jewish people. But for a small minority, the best of those students, they did not stop learning at the age of 12. Their school continued with a secondary education, a second-level education. This second school was called the Bet Midrash, and it took place inside the synagogue. And the scribes and the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, would teach the rest of the Old Testament to the best of those students. The top tier, the most elite, the ones who had it all right, they would go on until they were about 17 to memorize the entirety of what we now call the Old Testament. If you think your school was hard, try memorizing all of Leviticus and Psalms. Good luck. So the best of these students would continue to learn all of God's Old Testament. All of this story of who He was and how He interacted with the world and all that He did. And then, after this school, even these students, the best of them out there, they would go back home and they would work in their family business and they would just simply seek to live. With all of this knowledge and all of this education, they had the same outcome as everyone else, but now with a deeper, richer understanding of who God was. But for the best of these students, the best of the best of the best, something special was hopefully waiting for them. You see, if you were a teacher at the time, a rabbi, as it was called, your goal as a rabbi was to replace yourself, was to reproduce all of your understanding and all of your knowledge and all of your ability to live as one who follows God in such a way that other people after you, generations to come, could continue living exactly like you did. And so the best of the students in the lower school went on to study and memorize all of the Old Testament, and the best of those students hoped that one day they would become a disciple of a rabbi. Disciple is a word thrown around in the church today in so many contexts it becomes really confusing. So let me explain to you what a disciple of a rabbi was. If you were the best of the best and your resume looked great, if you were among the most elite to be accepted, if you were this person, you would find a rabbi whom you trusted. A rabbi whose leadership and influence and power were something you found to be valuable. A rabbi who you said, I want to be like that man. And you would approach the rabbi and you would ask, may I follow you? And the rabbi would conduct a series of interviews, a series of questions and answers, a series of trying to make sure you not only knew all of the Old Testament fully, but that you interpreted it and understood it and applied it exactly like this rabbi did. And if then you were good enough, and if then you would carry enough weight that your presence as a disciple for the rabbi would elevate them to a higher status in the community, then the disciple or the rabbi would say, follow me, let's go. And your job from that point forward was to take on a new identity, like those who went to Clown College, to become something other than yourself. If you were the best of the best of the best, if you were chosen by a rabbi, then your job from that day forward was to leave your family business and follow this rabbi, usually itinerant teachers, wherever he would go. If the rabbi would pick up and leave, you would leave with him. If he sat down to eat, you would eat with him. If he practiced Sabbath, you would practice with him. And your job was to imitate that rabbi in so many ways that eventually the rabbi would look at you and say, there's no difference between you and me. We are the same. Go, therefore, and make disciples. Like Clown College, to get into this prestigious role of being a teacher, one who was called out from the rest, to be in this prestigious place of a role that everybody wanted and few qualified for. It was the hardest thing you could ever apply for. And it would require all of who you were to become somebody different, to set aside your dreams and your ambitions and all of your desires, to set aside your preconceived opinions and notions, to submit yourself to say, I will be in every way like you. And this is the context that Jesus entered into. If you'd like to follow along, today we're going to read in Matthew chapter 9. Jesus, as he so often does, shows up and turns everything upside down. If you'd like to use the blue Bibles in the pews, it's on page 1016. You can use your phone or your own Bible to follow along. We're not going through a lot of verses, but a few that are enough to spend some time on. Matthew chapter 9, beginning in verse 9. As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, follow me. And he rose and he followed him. There's a lot of things wrong with this passage, so let's begin. First and foremost, as Jesus was going, he invited Matthew to follow him. Often Jesus is called rabbi. Often he's given this title of teacher, but rabbis didn't invite people to follow them. Rabbis waited for those who were worthy and those who were enough and those who had proven themselves to ask and want to follow them. Right off the bat, for the hearers and the time, for the witnesses to this moment, what are you doing, Jesus? That's not how this works. The best of the best of the best, if they're good enough and have proven themselves, then they get to be followers or disciples of a rabbi. You're just picking anybody off the street. He went a step further. Matthew, as he was sitting at the tax booth. Now, unless you work for the IRS or a CPA, most of us don't like taxes. And even if you work for the IRS or our CPA, you probably don't like paying taxes. But our culture of taxation is very different than theirs. You see, the emperor in their day and age would demand, you must pay me this amount. And he would delegate the responsibility to collect those taxes to people in all the regions that he reigned. And those people would say, I don't want to just be the pastor, man. I want to keep a little bit for myself. And they would in turn raise the taxes arbitrarily to whatever they felt fitting, so that they could have whatever they thought they deserved. And so in addition to paying the emperor, you also had to pay this person. And if you didn't, you could be, and probably would be, either put to death or thrown in prison. And these prisons were dark, dingy holes in the ground. They were not pleasant in the slightest of ways. Your life was likely to die within 6 months of being thrown in prison in the Roman Empire. So you had two options: pay the taxes or die. Matthew is sitting collecting taxes. So even for the Romans, he would not have been a popular man. But he was much worse. Because for the Jewish people, they saw the Roman Empire as an oppressive, illegitimate empire over them. And they believed this government had no place in charge, and they were waiting for the day when God would come in his power and his might and smite the government and free them to be his people forever. And Matthew was a Jewish man who at least had probably the Torah memorized. Probably not the rest of the Old Testament. He knew all of the law and the command and the will of God. He knew God's plans. And yet Matthew chose to become a tax collector. For the Jewish people, this is the Benedict Arnold of all Benedict Arnolds, the worst of the betrayer, the one who roots for Michigan when you know you shouldn't. Or even worse, Ohio State. Sorry, we're in the SEC. Roots for Alabama. You take your pick. This was the worst of the worst. How dare you betray us? How dare you serve this other king? How dare you submit to them and not to our God? Here's Matthew sitting at his tax collection booth where he extorted, he stole, and he manipulated, and he took advantage of his own people. And Jesus comes walking by and sees him sitting there. He says, "Come and follow me. Come and learn from me about the way of life of being with God. Come and learn about all of his laws and all of his rules, all of his commands, how he wants us to live, how he interacts. Come and learn everything about who God is and how he loves." Continues. And as Jesus reclined at table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. Those who followed after this man. It's bad enough to have one tax collector. There's many of them there at their table. And among that, there are other sinners there with Jesus. We live so desensitized to this that we forget how offensive that would be. Jesus inviting ISIS members, "Come, follow me." Jesus inviting people who voted in the worst possible ways you can imagine, for the worst possible people you can think of. "Come and share a meal with me." I mean, imagine if Harvard decided, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to walk down the street. In fact, we're going to stand outside of the prison, and we're going to wait for the pedophile who gets released. We're going to wait for the murderer who comes out. We're going to wait for the white nationalist who comes out. And then we're going to say, hey, come and join me. Come to Harvard and learn all that we have to offer, and we'll give it to you for free. Now, we may or may not have respect for Harvard these days, so that example falls short in some ways. However, for the people in Jesus' day and age, that's not what a godly person did. Every one of us knows you become like who you hang out with. This is why your parents, when you were a kid, warned you about hanging out with those kids over there, right? Because you know your kids are going to bring home their behaviors and act just like them. It probably goes the other way too, but you can't admit that it might be your kid who's the problem. Except for me, I know it's my kid. And the three of them can debate which one depending on the day, okay? Jesus is eating with many tax collectors and sinners. And when the Pharisees saw this, the ones who had been trained through the best of the best, the ones who were responsible for teaching God's will and plan and his good intention for his people, the ones who were responsible with making sure that the people of Israel lived according to God's way of life, when they saw what Jesus was doing, they said, sounds good. We're fine with that. No? When they saw this, they said, why does your rabbi eat with tax collectors and sinners? Doesn't he know what he's doing to his name and his reputation and his clout and his power? Doesn't he know that the words he speaks become less valuable if he associates with those people? He will never become the best of the best of the best if he's hanging around those people. When he heard it, when Jesus heard them, he said, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. Jesus, he responds, he says, don't you know that it's only sick people who go to hospitals? Anybody ever been healthy and wanted to just go and spend time at a hospital just because their food is really good? Probably not. Now, some of you are healthy and you're like, I'm going to work in a hospital so I can serve others. That's noble and great. I love that. Thank you. But generally, hospitals and doctors' offices are not the place we just hang out in unless we have a need. Unless there's something wrong and we're going and seeking healing, unless there's something broken and we say, can you make this right? Unless there's something missing and we're saying, can you restore? That's usually why we go to a doctor. And Jesus, he uses this image to call out the Pharisees. You keepers of God's law, you teachers of what God intends, who needs God more? Those who are broken or those who are whole and healthy and have everything together? It's a rhetorical question we should all know the answer to. And then he continues and he quotes the Old Testament from a book called Hosea. He says, go and learn this. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. And in Hosea chapter 5, where this comes from, in that chapter, God warns his people that he's going to come in judgment. And he warns that bad things are going to happen. And he describes how they had turned away from him. And even their priests were lying in wait to murder people along the way. And he describes in that chapter this reality that even those who desire to keep the law of God have left it and have forgotten him and have abandoned him. And in that chapter, he says, don't you know that I desire mercy and not sacrifice? And he continues in Hosea 5 to describe that God's desire is not that we would get it all right, not that we'd do all the right things in just the right order, not that we'd be the prestigious people who get into the best of the best, not that we would rise above everyone else. No, his desire is for mercy, not sacrifice. Mercy is not a word we use a whole lot these days. God's desire is for mercy. Judgment is when you get what you deserve. And mercy is when you don't get what you deserve. God desires mercy. He desires for those who deserve one thing to get something else. For those who deserve judgment, instead to have judgment withheld. Perhaps you've heard this story of Jesus many times in your life. Maybe this is brand new. I believe if it's brand new, you're in a better place than the rest of us. Because if you've heard this story of Jesus many times, perhaps you know, of course, he desires mercy, not sacrifice. But maybe, probably, like the Pharisees, you and I are more prone to look for those who are the best of the best, to seek to associate with those who can contribute something to our lives, to befriend and to join in worship and life with those who are just like us. But maybe, like the Pharisees, sometimes we need a reminder too, that God is not here for those who are healthy and have everything right. He has come like a great physician for those who are sick, for those who are broken, for those who are hurting and do not know how to heal themselves, for those who cannot fix their mess by themselves, for those who deserve one thing, but instead he desires mercy. And I believe Jesus spoke these words to the Pharisees that you and I, 2,000 years later, can learn. That we are invited, that we are called to believe in and to trust in and to follow after, like these disciples, to seek after this God who delights in mercy, who delights in sparing people what they deserve. And so when somebody speaks a harsh word or a lie, or when somebody does something mean, or when they cut you off in traffic, we can give them mercy and love them anyway. See, mercy is not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of just like turning a blind eye and pretending the wrong doesn't exist. Mercy is believing that the wrong exists, but the God who restores that wrong is even better. The God who makes all things new is even greater. Jesus came to eat and drink with sinners and tax collectors, many of them. And he invites you and I today to not be those who are the best of the best, but wherever we are, right where we are, to just come, to follow him, and to trust that he is enough. And we are invited, like our rabbi, to become more like him, to learn what it means that he desires mercy. He doesn't want you to serve more in the church or give more to the church or do more for the poor, though maybe there is more to be done because there are still those who are sick and need a physician. What Jesus wants from you and from me is that we would see us just as in need of his love and his mercy. And only as we gaze upon his love, as we look into his eyes, looking back at us with all of his love, only then do we become like our rabbi, able to give the kind of mercy he gives, able to do the kinds of things he does, the kind of people who imitate him and take on a whole new identity. Not an identity as Adam, not an identity as this person or the thing I do or the thing people recognize me for. No, an identity centered in being a child of God. Because I am his and he is mine, I too can sit with sinners. I can love the tax collectors. I can seek out those who are far from me and far from God. And I can spare them what they deserve. And instead, I can shower them with love. This is the invitation to follow Jesus that you and I, 2,000 years later, still are invited to. To sit with him until we become like him. And maybe one day, maybe today, we can do the very kinds of things he does, to love and to serve and to give to the least of these, that those who are sick might find a really good doctor. Will you pray with me? God, you are merciful when we seek judgment. We are quick to want our enemies and those who are far from us to receive your law and your wrath. And we forget that you are merciful. We forget that you have had mercy upon us. We forget that you came to make us whole and healthy. For it is not the righteous who you seek out, but sinners. So God, we come before you today, and we ask that you would help us to see our sin more than we see the sin in those around us. And as we see the mercy you have given to us, the forgiveness you pour out, the love that you give day by day by day, may we learn to love as you have, to be merciful as you are, to seek out those who are far from you, and to welcome them in. Now we pray, Jesus, as you taught us to pray, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. One of the things we do every week in this place is we collect an offering. And while we don't pass the plates or the bucket and we don't do anything like that visible, what we believe in this place is an offering, is an invitation to trust God and to join him in this work of seeking out sinners just like me and just like you, of seeking out those who are far from him, who are hurting, and showing them the way to this physician. So if you call this church your home and you came prepared to give today, you can do so in the black boxes as you exit. You can also do so online at thepointknox.com by clicking the little button in the bottom corner. However you give and whatever you give, know this: we don't give to get God's love, but because we already have it. Thank you.